Today on our Tech for Business podcast, we're joined by Jason, Director of Innovation and Solutions for Aura, and Meet, Director of Cybersecurity. We're discussing how modernizing your file management, moving from closet servers to the cloud, is the key to boosting design speed and meeting new security standards.
Good morning, everybody. Jason Lund. Super excited to start out the first podcast I've participated in since the new year. Nate, good to see you. Glad to have you along for this discussion because we are going to veer into some topics related to file sharing and collaboration and performance concerns related to how primarily commercial furniture dealerships, in the industry that I tend to focus on, interact with file data. But an incredibly important part of this journey is understanding the compliance and security components of this, because in particular, if you're, in the H&I ecosystem, Steelcase, Kimball dealers, Hahn, Allsteel, those dealers have really been getting pushed on CMMC compliance, which is becoming really an industry standard now, especially for dealerships who are selling to clients in those highly regulated industries. ESA is the big focus right now, but insurance companies, healthcare companies, banks, financial institutions, so on and so forth. So I think it'll be kind of a broad conversation. Ariel, thank you for inviting us to have this chat. And I'm going to kick it off by saying this can be a controversial topic. And what I want to talk about is I like to focus on technology from the perspective of driving business outcomes. Technology for technology's sake, I think, is a habit that sometimes we, as someone who used to be a desktop technician and worked in a help desk myself and went to data centers and swapped out hard drives in the middle of the night, did all that kind of stuff. We like tinkering with hardware. We like to have sort of what I could now call the illusion of control of our data and our environment that comes with that physical experience of hardware and hands-on. And I have tended to specialize my career around the end user experience with their technology. Some people call that the desktop. And it's funny, when you look at sort of the pantheon where I came from, which was Target Corporation, in that organization, I kind of fell to the bottom because everyone wanted to be a security person or a network person or whatever. But I just found that last mile experience a user has, kind of when everything comes together with their desktop, it's very complicated because there's so many variables and so much personalization. But I think, generally, like many things in my career, fortuitously, that led me to where I am now, which is really a hyper focus on design experiences and outcomes, because I have noticed and observed that it also drives great business outcomes for the dealerships that they work in. And the technology needs those designers, those interior designers, using tools that, if you're not from this industry, are more like an AutoCAD, or where you're specifying, in this case, furniture products inside of a workspace. That really drives sales outcomes. It's tied in every part of the business process these users have. So I've noted that by fixing designers' tech issues, that high tide tends to float all the boats in that dealership, being everyone's experience. So whether it's them interacting with their business systems, working remotely, teeing up a new office build out, as we are going through one of the most impressively large scale consolidations in the industry, as long as I've worked in it, what's happening right now is dealers are acquiring and merging. All this stuff comes into play. And to boil it down, how you store files is incredibly important in enabling all those things: performance, scalability. There are a lot of security concerns. And I would argue we've gone through a generational need to change the way we deploy technology that really it started during COVID. Most organizations were designing applications that people were going to come into the office primarily. So we were building so you could be most productive in an office, typically on a wired connection still. I know I've actually been a big proponent of going wireless, because it allows these dealerships to spend more of their money on furniture and space applications and less on recabling things. But as someone who also sells network switching equipment, this is a bit of a self-defeating concept. We sell both wireless and wired, so I can help either way. But bottom line is, after COVID, the style in which people work that these commercial furniture dealerships are trying to accommodate has also changed. People work in unpredictable network conditions. They're working at home on Wi-Fi, maybe into a co-working space. We as a company have embraced hiring people all over the country. So not everybody comes into the office. I rarely come into CIT's office, though I only live about an hour away. And so that has become the new normal. Network designs and really the basic IT strategy for many of these businesses in and out of the industry that I support have needed to really be modernized to adopt that. And security, and I'm glad Nate is here to be part of this conversation, is a big driver. But what I found is, if you boil back a typical dealership network infrastructure, people are still using VPN clients to get to file resources, even if they might be close to the cloud. You might have moved your file server from the closet, which, by the way, 99% of dealerships that have IT closets still, if I look up in the ceiling above it, there's a sprinkler head. I don't know what this trend is about, but it's the best worst thing. I talked about the illusion of control. We spend this time building out this beautiful server rack, getting it all cabled up. all this stuff. And then I look up and I'm like, well, there's either a sewer pipe or a sprinkler pipe sitting, a few feet from it. And so a basic physical emergency, or at one point I actually saw an air conditioner that had its condenser dropping water onto a metal pan sitting right on top of the server. So anyway, I'm bouncing around a bit here. So let me try and
fun fact for everyone listening. We just had a customer about a month ago that the sprinkler system unexpectedly just went off in their main location. And sure enough, that was the server room as well. And it flooded the entire building. So things do happen like that. So
yeah. And I unfortunately, I've had to deal with cabling behind. I mean, there's all the war stories, and I'll steer out of it for a minute. But the reason I'm talking about this is this: almost none of the dealerships that I have worked with, and I do a lot. I'm out at least once a month, typically visiting multiple dealers in different markets around the country, observing their physical use of technology, interviewing their users, making recommendations. Sometimes just, typically, sometimes I go out with Configura, and we'll go visit a few dealers and just learn how are their designers interacting with technology, and how is the software itself driving the experience, but how also is the rest of their tech infrastructure. And what I keep finding is there's a lot of people still using physical file servers out there, and still fixing and tinkering with laptops in the back room. And this is the controversial part of the conversation. I would say the value that IT provides the business is not in doing those things. We are there to be force multipliers. We are our business services team. Actually, one of my clients, one of the largest clients the IT has in the space, really the business services team includes IT, but they consider themselves a business services team. Services teams have service level agreements. Their focus, in my opinion, should be on driving those business outcomes and taking those commodity services and kind of getting them out of your way, because the business doesn't necessarily care how you get email or how you get Microsoft Teams. What they assume is that you have those things. And that's a minimum requirement, that you have a secure environment, it performs well. You don't necessarily need the IT team to do those things. You need them to facilitate using those tools to make the business work better, faster, et cetera, to make sure that you're innovating, that you're showcasing workspace applications and participating in tours with other technical people to talk about that kind of thing. Maybe you're deploying AI, work automation tools, for example. All these things that we can be doing. And I hate to say, when I look at a dealership sort of priority list, so much IT time is spent on what I hate to say, work that nobody cares about. They don't value it. And a minority of time is spent on things that business wants, which is aligning technology with their business objectives and business strategies. And this is where I get into conflict with some of my peers, which is, but Jason, I'm an IT person. I want to do IT things. And I say, you got to rethink what you're doing. The rest of us have had to do the same thing. You look at any other business practice in the office, whether it's HR or whether it's marketing, they've had to drastically change how they deliver services. Expectations have gone up. The use of automation and technology has supported that greater work. Often IT is actually the ones that are kind of dragging behind. And what we sometimes will find is that a user or a technologist in a business is doing things to sort of preserve their time, but that is at the expense of users at scale. You're supporting 200-300 users, but you're doing things to keep your sort of workload manageable. It has a really, really significant effect on the business. And the greatest platform, the platform I think from a technology standpoint that has the greatest impact on everybody in the dealership and holds a huge amount of value in terms of when you're working all day long on design files, you're putting hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of billable work into these file artifacts. And topic of the day is file storage. And how are we storing files today? Are we doing on-prem file servers that require to have a physical server sitting under a sprinkler pipe in your office, sharing a single internet connection that everybody has to come in on? So you got a bunch of bandwidth. And more likely you have to then buy a VPN solution. And Nate's going to not fall out of the chair, but Nate has rightly been warning people that VPN is one of the least secure technologies out there, and probably the number one point of ingress these days for bad actors to come into your network and start doing things you don't want them doing with your data. Is that, Nate, would you say that's a fair characterization?
Yeah, for the last, I think it was 2.5 years ago now, we started saying get rid of your traditional VPNs for user access. And so we do a lot of incident response these days, and it is by far the number one initial attack vector for VPNs these days, right? If you go out, look at, any of the new security alerts that are coming out regularly, you'll see this firewall vendor, this firewall vendor, this firewall vendor. I'm not going to pick any particular ones, but they all have them. And it's the authentication bypass to, like there's one out there right now is, if you had single sign-on, right, you did that because you expected that you have all the multi-factor and some more strengthened security posture for the logins. Well, there's just now a vulnerability to just bypass it altogether, right? And so that's why we keep talking to our customers about If you still need a traditional ingress point into your network, taking a look at things like the ZTNA or Zero Trust Network Access solutions, this is the architecture where you don't have a public hole open on your firewall. It kind of runs it through a cloud proxy or, kind of an intermediary to be able to grant access, greatly reducing the risk. So that's really where we want to talk to customers about that. And then again, when we're talking about these cloud file solutions, right, there's plenty of them out there. There are some that do meet certain industries a little bit better than others. And so, I don't want to necessarily go pick on any one of those ones. But from a security standpoint, one of the things that I've talked to these organizations about as well is, since we're talking about a lot of the, commercial workspace environment is they're dealing with massive amounts of files being generated in design files and CAD files, right? And a ransomware actor comes in and sweeps through and starts encrypting those files. These aren't really files that you can quickly regenerate because we know that they've taken massive amounts of rendering time to even get generated in the first place. And so what that means is that your restores are probably also going to take a long time because you may be dealing with, multiple terabytes of data because you have design files. Now, if you're part of the supply chain as well, you have big contracts and tight deadlines that you also need to adhere to because your contract is going to specify that you need to be able to likely provide services within a given timeline to ensure that their supply chain is met too, right? Jason would know that a little bit better than I would, but this is the business continuity discussions that you would want to have. Now, if your file shares are offsite, you've greatly reduced the risk that someone can just come in and sweep through it. The cloud resources oftentimes will have, built-in immutability or, the inability to tamper with those types of files at scale, right? Or, I'll pick on Microsoft, right? Is they have a 30-day kind of recycle bin. If someone does delete something, they have copies of it, right? They'll let you restore it. So that's really some of the initial security discussions. I haven't even touched on compliance or anything like that yet. So I know that Jason talked a lot about CMMC. So more than happy to continue diving into that one as well. But I'll stop there.
No, I mean, that's great because I think you describe a lot of the complexities. And again, this is not necessarily new, but the seriousness of it, meaning a lot of dealerships have known that they're going to need to worry about compliance, right? I've tended to push the NIST standard, the NIST framework, I guess I would call it, because it was a really good framework for us to measure, are we as IT providers based on a generic standard? Now, something that some sales guy decided to build for you, generally accepted best practices have drawn from years of PCI, HIPAA standards say, this is a framework that if you follow, is generally going to get you in the ballpark. Well, CMMC compliance effectively is built upon a lot of the NIST framework and is taking it a little bit farther. And you've got different levels. And I'm not going to go into the specifics for a moment, but you can't just bolt compliance onto a badly architected environment. And this is where the idea that, but I've got this stuff, what do we call it? The idea of buying a laptop and squeezing it to death, or buying a server and squeezing it for 10, 20 years until you've wrung every dollar of value out of it. I think one of the problems, and again, I will get to the end solution here, so bear with the journey here for a moment, is the mindset around making investments in technology is flawed because it is not taking into account true total cost of ownership dimensions, right? We're thinking about, I'm going to go to Dell, I'm going to go to HP, I'm going to go, any of the brands that we sell, we're going to buy servers. And by the way, we still sell servers. So when I talk about these concepts, I'm not trying to drive you into a product that I sell exclusively. We sell Microsoft, we sell HP stuff, Dell stuff. We sell all the solutions I'm going to talk about, whether I think they're a good fit for you or not. What I'm trying to drive you towards are solutions that are best aligned to your business in terms of, again, focusing IT resources on strategic, business driving features, not just on buying IT for the sake of IT. The sort of, it's like owning a boat where you have a hole in the water you pour money into, but sometimes you get to have some fun with it. I hate to say it, but that's all around a lot of IT budgeting, and a lot of IT value is calculated just based on the purchase price of something. But think about this: if you're buying a file server, you're spending $10,000 or $20,000 on the low end just to get something in the door. You've got to put software on that. You've got to back it up somehow. You've got to make sure the power coming into it is conditioned properly. You've got to physically secure it. You've got to air condition it. You may have to have some redundancy because if that physical server fails, anything running on it is no longer accessible. So you stack layers and layers and layers of complexity, and you got to have somebody probably on staff or through a managed service provider to keep that device running. So you've got this initial purchase price, but you've got this tremendous amount of additional cost tied to it. And you are still, if you think about commuting, I know not all of us commute the same as we used to before COVID, but you're effectively creating a sort of single lane to and from your environment that when traffic gets heavy, everyone's kind of stuck on this sort of limited capacity road because you cannot build unlimited sort of capacity in that physical space. That's one of the really great things about sort of cloud native or as a service applications that are now becoming normal. Microsoft 365. When was the last time we ran into a Microsoft email server on somebody's on-premise? It just doesn't happen anymore, right? So we've accepted that certain services just scale better and work better in the cloud. But when we talk about file stores, it is very common for dealers I work with to still have on-premise file servers, and there's a lot of disadvantages to it. And it goes with compliance, it goes with performance, it goes with just the operating costs and maintenance on it. Again, you're focusing, you have a finite amount of IT resource. Whether you have somebody you on staff, their time is still worth something. It's not free to have your IT guy spending 90% of the IT person running around just kicking servers and fixing laptops. If that's all they're doing, they're not really driving business outcomes. They're just making sure that the lights come on when you flip the switch. And my argument is, I love that people do that. I was a person that myself, but it's not driving value. And when we talk about file stores in particular, when you're using CT Designer, which is the most common primary design specification application that commercial furniture dealerships use today, that application was originally designed assuming an in-house flat network that where you had a file server in the office, people were coming in, they were plugging in, they're working. Well, that's no longer a reality. Now the software hasn't been rewritten. So how do we as technologists shape our environment, which is really the biggest part of our job now, is how do we plumb to meet the new working realities that are out there? And my argument is you have to have a file storage solution that has inherent caching built into it, because the way users are working with these technologies today is if they don't have that, they're dragging copies of their files from their file server, whether it's physical or their Microsoft Azure, and then running a server there. They're still dragging files onto their desktop, which is creating versioning issues, backup issues, potentially compliance issues, and we've noted file corruption and synchronization issues. If your file system natively, though, can support caching, meaning it makes a copy on its own and it quietly keeps it in sync. So the designer, whoever's using the file, doesn't even know this is happening. But what they do notice is no matter where they're working, it feels like the file is local, because it is. It's on their computer, but that copy is being kept secure and it's being backed up. It's attached to that, what Nate described as an immutable sort of file system on the back end. It's there. And when I started looking at how do I recommend the right solutions to dealerships, SharePoint and OneDrive are great solutions for certain applications. To be honest, it's free, right? It's included with your Microsoft 365 subscription. Each user gets a little bit of data that is shared among all users. So for example, just to lay out this part of this value proposition, when you set up your Microsoft tenancy, you get a terabyte of shared storage. And every user you add out of that is typically going to add like 10 gigabytes, right? So when you add a certain number of users, that pooled storage grows. And kind of like the idea of, well, I have a server, I need to run it for 20 years. People think, oh, well, I have SharePoint and OneDrive, I'm paying for it, I have to use it. The problem is SharePoint and OneDrive don't scale well for lots and lots and lots of files. And design files in CT Designer specifically generate a minimum of 10 files for every primary copy of a design file that gets created. Now, there are logical limitations on SharePoint libraries at 100,000 and 300,000 objects that breaks the ability for OneDrive, which is how Microsoft SharePoint synchronizes with your desktop. It starts to break. And so now you're no longer synchronizing data using this cloud resource. You've got scaling and management issues. You cannot bring drive letters over. So if you're migrating from a server that's on premise that had a G drive or a P drive or whatever, and you move to SharePoint, you just broke every single link your designers have that are XREF between their CAD drawing base plans and their CT drawings. So by migrating to a free resource, you've onboarded a ton of work for your users, made them less efficient, made them less effective. And while you may have a great experience the first 90 days, maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, at some point you're going to hit those 100,000, 300,000 limits. Those are not negotiable. You can go to Microsoft, search SharePoint file limits, and it'll tell you that. It's not a secret. It's not a rip on Microsoft. It's not designed for that kind of file use. So I have seen this. I've seen a number of dealerships adopt SharePoint because like, hey, it's free. Let's make use of it. And I applaud the effort to make use of good resources. The problem is it doesn't work. And it doesn't work in a way that actually makes designers less productive. And we are not at a point in the industry where that is a good outcome. There are specialized file solutions for different industries that do a better job at this. One great example in the marketing space, there's a product called LucidLink. LucidLink was designed and really rolled out at large scale during the pandemic to allow marketing folks to work on large, very complicated like video projects. So you could, put all your original sources in. I don't know the vernacular because I'm not a marketing person, but that was a start. And it used that file caching mechanism, and it had the drive letter mechanism. Now, it lacked other certain features. LucidLink is well suited to that marketing workflow. Is a platform that was designed specifically for the AEC industries, architecture, engineering, and construction. Now, that is an industry adjacent to commercial workspace dealers. Meaning, in fact, a lot of architectural firms who are kind of what I'd call upstream in the workflow chain for dealerships, they're getting the mechanical plans and structural plans in probably a CAD, AutoCAD, or Revit format, working through it, and then they're going to send it to a dealership to actually specify that furniture. They're likely using something like Ignite for their file storage. Why is that? Again, it is designed for that industry. It has baked-in tools. It's got immutable storage baked into it. Every user gets 200 gigabytes of data that's shared. So from a size and capacity standpoint, the baked-in data that's included with an Ignite subscription is typically more than a dealership needs out of the gate. So there's room to grow. There's no logical limitations. Drive letters come over. You can map drives or use those kind of slash, what are they called? UNC paths.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly, right. And so in the end, here's what, from a business standpoint, you don't none of this stuff really matters. What matters is designers will work faster on Ignite than they will on most other platforms. If you compare it to something like Box is a great platform for cloud-based file storage. It's got great compliance capabilities baked into it, and it has some level of caching. It doesn't have offline support in the same way, however, and it has it's a good platform for, I think, more generic utilization, and it's got great integration officially with a bunch of other cloud platforms, which, to give them credit, is a really smart move. But Ignite is very, very specialized for the industry. You can get baked in PDF editing tools, so you get the capability to do document signature capture like you would at DocuSign. So when I'm looking at the total cost of ownership to buy this platform, I'm getting a payback in day-to-day productivity for everybody, particularly designers who are, from a costing standpoint, measured more aggressively than anybody else in a dealer's sort of internal cost structure standpoint. It has got external secure collaboration baked in, those file caching features. When you move from another platform to Ignite, there's no disruptive change in all your file links. Again, you've got immutable versioning baked right into the platform. And if, depending on which tier, you buy it on a per user per month basis, you can start to replace other software components that you're buying. So you standardize on fewer platforms that have greater function, that accelerates the basic function of all your workers. And there is no upper limit. There's no single lane everybody jumps into like you would having a VPN into a file server in your office that you have control of. Ironically, most people who are doing that, by the way, are actually backing up to a cloud provider. They're still at the mercy of this big bad thing that a lot of us were afraid of sort of adopting early on. It's just they're putting the bottleneck in a different place. So again, what I'm talking about is a product like Ignite, which is designed for the use case for this industry. When you start to layer in all those other value propositions, honestly, it almost costs less. Some of these other products, even if they're free. A personal anecdote that I'll make here is when I was very, very new in my career at Target, I was afforded the opportunity to take our entire IT environment as a dealership out of Target corporate. Now, it had to be compliant with Target's internal requirements, but I had to run it with a really small team. Target had really standardized on Microsoft. Hyper-V was the name of the product, and it was free to me to use. I didn't have to pay for it. But I had a really small team, and at the time, VMware was a better virtualization platform that could be run with a lot smaller team. And I went and did the ROI and said, paying for VMware will actually save me money and effort over Microsoft in this case. And that was a bit controversial within Target. That was something that because we were doing something new at the time, it was controversial, but ultimately the business driver, the people who evaluated the use case said, he's making the right choice. He's going to be accountable for that choice, but that is the right choice. And they let us invest in that. And it worked out really well for us. So my thinking has always been, it's not always about what's the easiest, or free is not always free. What is the true cost of ownership? When I look at a platform like that, that's what I see. And lately, the conversations dealerships are having with me that really segues nicely into another point I want Nate to jump on is compliance, because that CMMC compliance, that is really a key part of you being able to do business with certain entities that require you to prove evidence that you're doing the right things. This is kind of twofold. Cyber insurance used to be pretty easy just to buy and say, yeah, I got it, I'm good. And if I do, I don't know how to say it, like with my kids, like my kids go driving too fast to get speeding tickets, whatever else. Like cyber insurance no longer is, hey, buy it and whatever you do, it's okay, we got you, buddy. No. You actually have to consider compliance and being aligned with it. So this is what I like. Within the Ignite product stack, they have their standard sort of compliance baked into the daily product, but there is a whole, what they call their .gov stack, that has compliance baked in. And Nate, I think I'm gonna pass the torch off to you so I can shut up for a second. This becomes really important because clients are asking us for this all the time. So Nate, why don't you chat a bit about how you think that really fits the bigger picture here?
Wait, I'll breathe for you.
Yeah.
All really good info there. Yeah. So, right. So this is kind of where we started off, right? And obviously the operational components of it was extremely important. And I think Jason really did a good job breaking down how, you can go down one path and run into issues, right? And run down the next path and run into issues. And so I'll touch a little bit about the compliance. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into anything here. This is, it's supposed to be a holistic conversation today. But as these dealer principals are coming down with, the kind of the supply chain requirements of increasing the security posture and talking about things like CMMC, right? There's 3 levels to CMMC today, right? Level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is basically the, kind of minimal security controls. There's about 54 controls roughly on level 1. As soon as you go to level 2, there's like 196. And so it's a significant uptick in that. And the industry is saying we may or may not, for future contracts, require, a level 2. This is something that the government just put in place back in November. And so this is nothing new, but if let's say the DoD says we require level 2 for all the supply chain falling down, whoever the person with it's basically called a prime contractor, the person with the direct contract with the DoD, they will say we require that level 2 for that type of contract, and we're going to adhere all the way down based off of the information that's going to be passed downstream. And so again, these file shares, I'll touch on a little bit, is one of the big components on any level of CMMC is going to be the access control. Is if you are going to be taking, contract info or, controlled, unclassified information or CUI, you will have to have strong controls of who's accessing, who's viewing, who's modifying, who's tampering, right? So as Jason was talking about, well, if someone can take those files on their own computer, that breaks the authentication chain unless you have, strong monitoring controls in place. And so that's where these tools come in, is they track touch to those files, right? And so you clearly have an access control list of here's everyone who's touched it, and I can prove that, if I am ever audited. And so you can also put strong controls around it, right? And, especially as you get into, some of the CMMC and, maybe even touching eventually on things like ITAR, depending on the data that's out there, is data residency. We know that some of these dealer principals are working with sometimes overseas designers, right? They want to be able to, operate 24/7, and, maybe they will start a design during the day and they pass it off to an overseas team to complete it and then send it back. So that way they can pick it back up in the morning. Well, you can't really have an overseas individual working on ITAR data, right? That's all weapons arms for the United States. And so now you have to build the strong controls and the barriers around all that data. And so that's where these tools come into play, as well as you can set up, again, up in the, FedRAMP, authorized, tools, right? If you're going to be working with the federal government and stuff, they're going to be looking for, is it FedRAMP authorized? So you have to show that due diligence. And then again, having the controls and barriers around it to say, yes, we know that these are properly segmented, audited, and everything. That's really where the power of these tools come in, is because it's all kind of inherently built in. And oftentimes these third-party providers, I'll go pick on, this isn't necessarily the dealer principal, but, let's go say, healthcare, right? These vendors will go oftentimes sign some type of AA agreement, right? A business associate agreement, and say, yes, we're a subprocessor of this information. They'll do the same with, the CGIS security amendment for, police departments or law enforcement agencies, CMMC and all that. And so that's where you get more than just the solution, right? You have to have the compliance and the structure around it. Is also, you have to think not just your own employees, who at the vendor possibly has access to your data, right? Is that on the back end, there's engineers that may not be accessing this data based off of like troubleshooting and support, right? And so that's where these government clouds also come in and say, if we go on the government cloud of, I'll pick on Ignite, all of the employees that have access to that tenant are all screened individuals, right? They've done their background checks and everything like that. There is no foreign nationals that maybe have access to that data, right? So you're essentially encompassing the holistic requirements of that compliance, not just the solution to store your files.
Compliance is such a critically important. It's no longer well, I just have to do this because, dad's checking on me, right? This is part of who you get to sell to. And the market gets real small when you cannot sell to insurance companies and healthcare companies and banks. It's a big part of the market. And GSA contracts and E-rate contracts in the education space, these are all areas where you have to have your compliance ducks in a row. And if I step back into that sort of VCIO or tech leader role, I generally want fewer platforms that, for me as a business manager, right, I have less complexity in dealing with the oversight of that stuff because that's not my core business. When I was an IT leader at a dealership, I started using a managed services team very early on because my team said, look, we don't have time. We're trying to do all these other things that are important. They're client facing, they relate to bids, but I'm falling behind on patching. Like, well, that kind of work can be dealt with as a commodity. Let's make that something you don't have to worry about, right? And let's fold in these other applications. So when you need to worry about something that's industry specific and unique in our domain, that's when I need your expertise. And like a platform like Ignite, because it wraps up those compliance requirements, it gives you great performance. It's got a very predictable model for cost scaling. You subscribe kind of per user per month to whatever tier plan you need. If you need that sort of government compliance component, you can actually build a separate tenancy for those files and those users separate from your primary tenancy. So you don't have to pay the premium for everything. You internally start to segment your work between that. And again, you stack value on top of itself. You give yourself limitless scalability, right? You can have 8,000 users on your Ignite files. You don't have to worry about building your network circuits to size for that, where if you're hosting stuff on your own servers, you got to deal with that stuff. And the more complex it is, the more data you have, the more VPN. I mean, all this stuff starts to pile up where it just doesn't make sense. If you really want your technology team to be focused on being a business services team, we got to take some of this what I will call busy work off your plate. This is why I'm a really big proponent of leasing hardware. Same reasoning. Like I like to tinker with hardware. I'm a volunteer at a local nonprofit that allows me, then when I'm going to get my hands dirty and tinker with hardware, I can go there and do that. During the day, that's not my job. My job is to focus on user outcomes and solving problems at scale or whatever else it is.
Yeah, and Jason, I think one of the other things that kind of relate to what you're talking about is the scalability. Is you started off the conversation saying that this industry is under a rapid M&A
Yes.
cycle right now, right? And consolidation. And so, just from a business standpoint, if we're talking about, rapid consolidation, is one of the dealerships, they may have their file shares. You probably have yours as well, right? Now, do you have to try and keep those separate, or do you have to try and blend them into one server architecture to consolidate? But what if your host and your SAN, storage network isn't big enough? Now you're talking about new capital expenditures to add additional storage. And if it's rapid, that you might be replacing hardware extremely quickly, or you're going to potentially overshoot and say, I don't even know how much data I need. Let's just buy a petabyte worth of storage and not use most of it in hopes that we're going to have an acquisition. So if we're talking about the scalability of just, great, we know that as we acquire a new dealership, let's say they have 75 designers, we will accommodate another 75 users into the platform and then do the project work to transfer those into the overall data structure that we have defined already. That looks a lot more appealing than new capital expenditures for server hardware and site-to-site VPNs or SD-WAN or anything like that, right?
No, that's a great call. The other thing is when you're thinking about doing acquisitions and mergers, right? I mean, I'm not a CFO. I work for a number of CFOs. Clearly, I have to be able to talk to them because they're the ones asking, why are you trying to sell me something and what's the ROI, right? But when you're getting ready to do an acquisition and merger, you're often going to the bank, ask for money, this and the other thing. You're suddenly having to pile a bunch of additional capital expenses to make that business that you just acquired functionally compliant. Because guess what? You can buy somebody, and if you just attach them to your network, you may have just ruined all the compliance that allows you to sell to the customers who are your bread and butter already, right? So you have to think about, if you're going through acquisitions and mergers, how do I integrate data stores? And again, talk about file links. If I suddenly move everybody into a SharePoint site that was on-prem file servers and they had a bunch of links in their business system, say they're running Core versus Team Design versus Chameleon, you've now broken all of those links there. So it's not just the designers who are now dealing with this problem, it's everyone else. So when we're looking at this file storage problem and looking for platforms that are secure, they provide great performance enhancements, they can accommodate disparate sort of source files that can be brought in with various migration tools, Ignite, and a lot of good tools like Ignite have migration tools for almost every platform in the world, meaning if you acquire somebody who's using Box and SharePoint and on-prem file servers, there's a way to bring that data in and get it into your standards and practices that do comply with your security programs and compliance programs. And that's a big deal because, again, I've never seen anything like it. The acquisition and merger rate within dealerships right now is astounding, even at manufacturer level. I mean, the news of H&I purchasing Steelcase was a big deal. It now has created, I think, what is now the combined largest manufacturer in the world, where Miller Knoll, again, formerly Herman Miller and Knoll merged during COVID. We've got another major merger. So even the manufacturers themselves are merging. We cannot continue to support a bunch of disparate platforms because it's comfortable or whatever else it is. We have finite amounts of labor to manage these platforms. We've got to make them functional, affordable, scalable, and secure in a way that allows us, again, as an IT team, to focus on, again, those kinds of activities. Like, it takes a lot of time for an IT team internally to look at those merger and acquisition activities. How many users am I bringing in? What's their data look like? How does the business system survive, et cetera? The storage platform under the hood touches everything in your IT environment, and getting it right the first time and then getting the benefits from it over the long term is a huge consideration. So again, I realize I am talking very specifically about the Ignite product. And I want to emphasize the fact that we can sell anything. We really do. And we have partnerships with a lot of different file storage solutions, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. We sell a ton of Microsoft, we sell Google, we sell the Box product. I went out and sought Ignite out to become a vendor at CIT because of how well it aligns with the industry, because I've seen it used by dealerships before we decided to become a reseller of it. And because of the feedback we've gotten from our clients who are onboarding and saying, this is a great solution, it really does. Again, even those dealerships that don't have IT people, it's allowing those dealer principals to feel more secure that their data's in a good spot, that next time an acquisition happens, they don't have to worry about, I got to go buy servers, I got all this stuff. It simplifies the thinking, lets them focus on doing business. And from a designer standpoint, where I have been obsessively focused on those outcomes, it just makes the designer's experience better with their technology across the board. Whether they're using the Syncly product stack, the CT designer / configure stack, or some combination of those things, I think it's a great solution. And there are industries outside of that AEC space for which it is suitable. It's not exclusive to that, but it is designed for those use cases. So that's the appeal I have. That's what I like about it. Shout out to them, by the way, if you're coming to TechCon coming up here in May. Sounds like Ignite's going to be there. So if you'd like to check out the platform and anyone who works with it, they'll be there. I am glad to certainly meet with anybody who wants to talk about Ignite, get a demonstration from their team. They're really good at those demos. I can certainly help you look at what you're currently doing with storage, give you an objective point of view on where does this make sense? If it doesn't make sense, what does that look like? So on and so forth. I try to be an objective advisor, even if I can sell you something. Sometimes I'll step back and say, hey, this isn't the right solution for you. What you're doing right now is actually just fine. But it's very rare that I would find Ignite is not a good fit for a dealership that doesn't already have a really, really good cloud native solution with the ability to do file caching, bring over those drive letters, and just generally be able to replace a certain number of tools that you're paying for every month, every user. Those nickel and dimey $5 a month subscriptions add up really fast, so on and so forth. So anyway, Nate, any other closing thoughts on the, I know we've kind of covered a lot of ground. I'm gonna have to do an executive summary because I can't imagine a dealer principal sat through more than about the first 2 minutes of me monologuing here.
No, I just wanted to touch on some of the compliance and how it aligns there. Take breath for you every once in a while.
Thank you.
And also shameless plug is Jason didn't bring it up on here, but his passion about trying to help designers. If you're a designer, CIT Aura, right, are offload rendering to help you also be able to close the laptop at night, right? You don't have to sit there and let it render on your laptop. So something that Jason didn't bring up, but really that was his brains and baby. So, it's something that I want to at least acknowledge and say, there's other ways that CIT can assist you as well. So a shameless plug there.
And I will say this, when you are looking for a partner to support your technology needs, there are a lot of ISPs, managed service providers out there in the country and the world. There are a lot of great tech teams out there. We specialize within CIT. I run the Aura division. The Aura division is focusing on taking everything that CIT does, for its clients in all the industry support, whether it's finance, banking, healthcare. And we specialize in the technical needs of a commercial furniture dealership. We have a specially trained technology managed services team that answers help desk tickets and service tickets. When we're looking at the engineering requirements, how do we pick platforms? This is where Ignite popped up. How do we deal with these specialized needs at scale and give advice to clients? And what I'll say is, even if we're not, we can sell you the service itself. We are a turnkey provider. We have dealerships with locations not only around the country, around the world that we help with their technology, soup to nuts, all their laptops, their help desk, everything. We work with them in synergy with their team. We become an extension of their business services team. There are other dealers for whom we provide an advisory service. They have a great tech partner, but that tech partner doesn't have that specialized knowledge of the industry, and that's where we supplement them. So we can help you by either providing direct services to you, replacing bits and pieces. If you don't have a tech team and you need one, that's where we can step in. If you're going through an acquisition and merger and you've just suddenly blown your scale up by a factor of 4, we can help you accommodate that with a predictable cost structure. Again, we can cover that 24-hour need, so your tech team doesn't have to be staffed 24 hours a day. That's something that I know a lot of IT folks at dealerships, designers are working overnight, and there's nobody manning that service desk to help them. That's where working with a partner like us, where we've got that specialized knowledge of the industry, we've got the scale to support you. But again, we can meet you where you are, either as a more consultative partner. We can help you make sure you have licenses. We can help you source laptops that are pre-curated to run CET Designer. And yeah, if you want to go into the CET Designer marketplace and you do a lot of rendering, our Aura Acceleration in partnership with Configura, we developed it together, completely change and transform the way you use PhotoLab to visually represent your talents and your skills and your design plans to your clients. You can do 16 or 20 rendering at the time it would take you to do 1 with that service. And your designers can keep working on other things while that happens. So we are very, very deeply passionate and focused on this. It's not just me. We're bringing people like Nate in. We're bringing our CEO and our services team, focusing on how do we use AI technologies to automate work processes to make other parts of your dealership even more efficient. So really helping you bridge those technologies. We even offer a class where we're not selling you anything except knowledge. We're trying to help you upskill your management team to understand how AI can apply to your business problems, letting you define what those problems are, and giving you guidance through using these tools, these LLMs to solve your own problems. And then saying, hey, if you want to engage us further, you can, but there is no obligation. There's no pitch after the pitch. We're here to help you evolve your thinking very quickly in concepts that maybe you don't have a resource you can trust to go to get that first step made. So anyway, thank you for listening. Hopefully some of the topics here that I and Nate wandered over, Nate did a good job being structured. I was me. We're helpful. And again, if you'd like to meet with us, we can put a link out to schedule time with myself and Sarah, who is our primary account manager in the commercial workspace services space. We'd love to talk to you about any questions you have. Spend a little bit of time understanding what's going on in your world. If you're going to be out, if you're an independent furniture rep who's going to be in Arizona at the NAIRC, we're going to have a booth there in Arizona at the end of next month in February. And of course, we'll be at the CET Experience in October in person if you want to come out and see us in Cincinnati, Ohio. And of course, come see us at TechCon in May. I am working on getting an industry group together. So people who are tech leaders within the commercial workspace services space who want to come to Minneapolis in March, it's a little bit warmer, I promise, want to come to Minneapolis in March, learn a bit, talk amongst yourselves, amongst peers who work in the same technology stack, and then spend a day with CIT, meeting with all of our vendors, meeting with our partners, meeting with our whole team to understand what we can do and just learn it. Just learn about AI, learn about storage technology, security, spend a day, doesn't cost you anything except your travel to get here. And we'll go from there. So again, thank you for your time, your energies, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. If you liked today's episode, share your thoughts with us. Like, subscribe, or reach out at info@citsolutions.net. For more, visit citsolutions.net/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.